This presentation is about students' preferences regarding alternative methods of teaching, that is traditional, online, or flipped classes. Initially, what I'll do is I'll look at the role of technology in terms of how we teach, and from there on, I'll look at the research that has been done, including my research in this area. A major development as to how we teach came because of the printing press invented by Gutenberg in 1440. Prior to the printing press, the method of teaching was that students lived with their teachers, and teachers were essentially involved in all aspects of student learning. With printing press, duplication of reading material became much easier and less costly, and this gave rise to what we call the traditional classroom. And this traditional classroom can be divided into two parts. One part where students and teachers meet and the teacher lectures in the classroom. The second part is students go home and read the textbook and work on problem solving exercises. And traditional classroom is a method that we have adopted and have been using for a number of centuries. Now, in the last 50 to 60 years, there has been a lot of research in the field of cognitive psychology, particularly what are the different levels of student learning, and this diagram represents that. Now, remembering and understanding are considered to be the lower forms of student learning. Evaluating and creating is considered to be a higher form of student learning. Now, when in the traditional classroom, lower level of learning, that is understanding and remembering, is taken care in the class meeting. That's where the instructors are involved. And this cognitive psychology tells us that instructors need to be involved in higher forms or higher levels of student learning, that is applying, analyzing, evaluating, and so on. And students on their own should remember and understand the course material. This diagram is a revised Bloom's taxonomy. The next impact of technology on how we teach came because of the World Wide Web in 1990s. And from our perspective, it was the learning management system that was developed in 1997, through which instructors could disseminate information to students and also test them online. Examples of LMS are Blackboard, Canvas, and so on. Through this, what we have seen is an explosion of online courses, and this explosion has been helped by the administration. They were primarily responsible for this, and then the instructors were also helped because of online course material being made available by publishers and also available for free through open education resources. The second development in World Wide Web from the perspective of education happened in early 2000s when creating and sharing of videos became easy and free. And then we had the phenomena of YouTube in 2005. And after 2005, what we have seen is an explosion of videos on YouTube, including how-to videos. For example, how to replace a car battery, how to cook a particular type of meal. But before the advent of YouTube, a person by the name of Sal Khan created lecture videos that resembled classroom lectures. This was an animated visualization of lectures, and his contribution in a way has been to revolutionize the way we teach. Number one, this gave rise to what we call the flipped classroom. And another thing it has given rise to is the MOOCs, examples Coursera, Udacity, edX, and so on. Here is the modern definition of flipped classroom. Basic learning takes place before the class meeting through automated delivery of video lectures that resemble classrooms. So students have to watch them and try to understand the course material before they come to the class meeting. And when they come to the class, The instructor undertakes a lot of active learning exercises. These could be Q&A session, directed discussion, problem solving exercises, and so on. So here is the modern definition of a flipped classroom. Thus we now have three methods of teaching. One, the traditional class, in which the instructors lecture and students try to understand the basic course material. Then they go home and work through problem solving exercises. The second method of teaching we have is 100% online classes, where there is no class meeting and all learning and problem solving is done by students on their own. The third method we have now is the flipped classroom, where basic learning is done before the class meeting through watching of lecture videos, and when they come to the class there is a lot of active learning exercises. I have created a flipped classroom based on several years of experimentation. For example, between 2012 to 2013, I searched for an app which I could use to create videos regarding economics. And in fall 2013, I had created about 20 lecture videos on about 5 weeks of classroom teaching. So what I did is I had an agreement with my students, and that is the class would meet once instead of twice a week. Students loved that part. But students had to watch videos and complete online assignments at home. And during class, students had to ask specific questions and will also be tested. And since this was an experiment, if students didn't like it or I didn't like it, we could just stop this experiment. And this became extremely useful. And in spring 2015, I offered intermediate micro as a flipped course. And then I started experimenting in other classes, international trade and principles of microeconomics, and formally introduced these courses after experimentation in fall 2016. And now all these classes are being taught as flipped classes. Now, based on students' inputs and my impression, the structure of my flipped classroom has evolved over time, and this is what we have at present. The first is video lectures. I have created about 150 video lectures for different courses, and none of the video lectures are of a duration greater than 15 minutes. That is something students have to watch before they come to the class. And then embedded with each lecture video is an online assignment which students have to complete. And then we also have a discussion forum, mainly for students and by students, where I intervene as and when necessary. And then we meet in class, and what students are expected to ask me are specific questions about a topic, and I respond to them. And I also have a directed discussion where I raise issues and I ask students to respond to the issues that I have raised, and then they are tested through assignments. Now, how do students perform under alternative methods of teaching has become an active area of research on learning outcomes. And what the existing research shows is that learning outcomes under the traditional classroom is lower than what we have under a flipped classroom. And then we also have research which compares online to traditional class, and the student performance in online classes is much lower than what we have in a traditional class. So if we were forced to rank different teaching methods in terms of student performance, flipped will be on top, followed by traditional, and then followed by online classroom. As far as research on student preferences go, there has been very little work done. The first paper on this was in 2000, which was very interesting, but then we didn't have the technology we have to create the flipped classroom. And then we have another paper by Roach in 2014, but this paper suffers from various limitations. It was just for one semester that he conducted the survey. It was a very small sample of 96 students, and this was just done at principals level. And the modern definition of flipped classroom is not really applicable, in the sense his was a case of a partially flipped classroom, and then he made no comparison with online classes. To conduct my research, I administered a 10-question survey on a 5-point Likert scale towards the end of the semester, and I asked students to give their preferences, and this happened between 2014 to 2017. And what I have are about 361 students respond to my survey. The questions I've asked is about alternative methods of teaching, and this was conducted at principals as well as upper level courses. And then I also asked them about the structure of work outside the classroom, and then questions about reading versus video lectures. Here are the results of my survey. The first question I asked is, do students prefer video lectures over classroom lectures? And I've represented my results in terms of a pie chart. The blue color represents the preference, that is, the students prefer video lectures over classroom lectures. The orange color represents the alternative, and that is, students prefer class lectures over video lectures. And the gray color represents indifference on the parts of students. And so here we see that video lectures are preferred 69% of the times over the classroom lectures. What about video lectures over textbook reading? And we find 88% of the students prefer video lectures over textbook reading. The next question I ask is, do students prefer flipped classroom over 100% online? One based on textbook reading, and what we find is 76% of the students prefer flipped classroom over 100% online class based on textbook reading and PowerPoints. Then how about flipped classroom over 100% online class based on video lectures and reading? And we find 74% of them prefer flipped classroom over 100% online class based on video lectures and reading. The next question I asked is, do students prefer flipped classroom over the traditional classroom? And what we find is 63% prefer, 17% prefer the traditional classroom. The next question I ask is, do students prefer short online assignments associated with each video over no online assignment? And 78% of the students prefer short online assignment as compared to no online assignment. Then I also asked students, do students prefer short online assignment associated with each video over one longer assignment for the week? And 87% of them preferred a short online assignment. The next result is, do students prefer weekly structure over daily structure? When I give weekly structure, they have flexibility to do as and when they like over the week, and 88% prefer the weekly structure. The next question is, do students prefer flipped mastery? That is, they have to attain a certain level of learning before they can move on to the next assignment. And here we have a lot of split. Only 23% prefer flipped mastery over no flipped mastery. The last result for me is, do students prefer recommended over required textbook? And as you would expect, it is 85%. To summarize and conclude, my work shows that students prefer flipped class over alternatives. Research done by others shows better learning outcomes under flipped. Then the question comes to our mind is, why we have seen no explosion of flipped class offerings, and there are several reasons for that. Number one being large startup cost. For me, it took me about 3 years to create my own flipped classroom. Number two, it does require a certain amount of confidence on the part of instructors to answer a variety of questions. And the third reason, again, is equally important, and that is the administration has not been as supportive of flipped class as they were of 100% online. This concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.